Welcome back. Tim here, and today I'm attempting my second standalone furniture build, a single-drawer oak nightstand. I know, a pretty bold project idea for only my second furniture build, but I'm building this nightstand entirely for myself, strictly as a hobby to practice my skills. So it certainly doesn't need to result in flawless heirloom-grade furniture. If it functions fine in my bedroom and I learn new lessons constructing it, I'll call it a win. Thankfully, my mother-in-law gifted me these amazing oak boards to work with that have outstanding grain patterns just waiting to shine through. Only catch is these raw slabs are all cupped and twisted like crazy right now. But that's why God invented thickness planers. Here's hoping my previous furniture building experience crafting a modern coffee table has actually given me enough preparation for this major furniture undertaking. Alright, it's time to break down the raw material into usable boards. The game plan is crafting a petite floating cabinet with a single drawer all held up by tapered oak legs. And I'm hoping to use oak for the entire project if this stock allows. First things first, I chop these planks down to more reasonable lengths on the miter saw. This chop job leaves me with shorter and more manageable workpieces to run through the thickness planer. Speaking of which, that's the next stop. I need to remove any cupping and twisting until both faces are flat and parallel all the way across each board. To keep them stable through my planer and get the first flat face, I'm using a simple sled jig I threw together out of some leftover kitchen cabinet parts. With flat square stock prepped, now I can trim away the live edges. I first make one straight, smooth rip cut down the length of each board using my track saw. With one straight edge established, I can now head over to the table saw and remove the opposite edge, leaving me with boards that have two clean parallel edges. You know, even as a total amateur woodworker, I've found that challenging myself to construct real furniture like this nightstand has been incredibly rewarding. Sure, sometimes projects turn out less than perfect, but I learn by doing. To me, it's not really about the end product itself. It's the skills I pick up along the way that provide real value. Lessons learned from the inevitable mistakes and creative workarounds discovered fixing errors. Will this nightstand turn out flawless? Doubtful. But I guarantee constructing it will teach me things that make the next piece better. It's embracing the journey of gradual growth that makes this hobby so fulfilling. With my oak milled, it was time to fabricate the base components, starting with the sleek tapered oak legs. My original plan was to cut 4 cm square legs out of the oak boards. But after milling, my thickness landed at just over 3 cm. I first cut the legs to rough size, 4 by 3 cm. Then I glue on 1 cm strips to beef them up before sending them back through the planer, resulting in those full 4 cm square dimensions I was aiming for. With the leg blanks replaned to proper thickness, now I could mark out and cut my tapers using a tapering jig on the table saw. To get consistent angles on all 4 legs, I first ensure they're all exactly the same length by cutting them to final size on my miter saw. Then the taper jig on my table saw lets me precisely dial in consistent angles on each piece. Now you may notice my dull table saw blade is charring the oak legs as I feed them through. No worries though, I can clean up those scorch marks quickly with my electric hand plane. Now I have all my base parts and 4 identical legs ready for assembly once the main cabinet is constructed. I'm finally ready to start constructing the cabinet box, but as I look at my oak pieces, it hits me that I definitely don't have enough left. I slice up the remaining oak boards into thinner strips on the saw and rotate them 90 degrees. This gives me more surface area to make up wider panels, even if they won't have stunning continuous oak grain. After glue up, I've now got cobbled together butcher block panels, not gorgeous, but sufficient to build the cabinet. In the end, it may resemble a cheap kitchen countertop more than high-end furniture with these panels. But I have to work with what I've got, and I can still make a functional cabinet that should match nicely with those legs. With my scrappy oak panels fully glued up, they're covered in ugly burn marks from that table saw blade. To remedy this, I ran the panels through the thickness planer until I had fresh, cleaned up wood. While I have that machine dialed in, I may as well ensure I have a consistent thickness across the panels for joinery later on. Alright, oak panels prepped. Now on to sizing them to their final dimensions. I tried cutting one straight edge with my track saw first, but halfway through the track shifted, resulting in an unsquare, unusable edge. Not wanting to risk any more slips, I switched to my table saw with a crosscut sled. This produced reliable, accurately dimensioned boards with ease. I did a quick test assembly to confirm everything was aligned and functioning as expected. Then I broke it all down again to sand the individual components, up to 240 grit. Okay, with my oak pieces cut and ready, it's time to actually build this cabinet. I'm going to use my biscuit joiner here to help me with the joinery. I mark out and cut little slots along the cabinet edges which fit wooden biscuits. All I have to do is add some glue, slip in a biscuit and clamp it up. The biscuits will help keep everything aligned and square. I know biscuits are not the prettiest joinery in fine woodworking, but they're quick, simple and crazy sturdy once that glue dries. A key design goal of mine was giving the illusion of the cabinet box floating above the tapered oak legs. To achieve this, I added a recessed oak frame to the bottom of the cabinet carcass. Now ideally, I would have cut a rabbet directly into the cabinet base, but I only just thought of that. So, I improvised a little frame that achieves a similar floating result, almost as cleanly. I'll admit a pro woodworker would chuckle at my attempt at a floating recess. But you know what? It's for me. It feels sturdy enough for real-world use, and from the outside no one will ever know. I love little workarounds like this that elevate my projects beyond my actual skill set. Moving on to assembling the base now, bringing the base frame pieces to life. Rather than strictly gluing, I'll reinforce the joints with pocket holes and screws. The pocket hole screws will not only add more strength when building the base, but they will also allow a slight flexibility, drawing the base square with the floating cabinet later on. Pocket holes aren't the most elegant joinery method, but on hidden surfaces like this, they make assembly a total breeze while still ensuring maximum strength. Plus, like I said, there's some forgiveness if my precision isn't spot on when I eventually marry this up to the floating cabinet box. It's time to join the floating cabinet box with the tapered leg base. I added a bead of wood glue along the top edge of my cabinet's recessed oak frame. Then I positioned the base on top. With everything aligned, I clamped the joints tightly. My plan was to reinforce this glue up with pin nails while the adhesive dried. But turns out my nails weren't long enough to penetrate both sections. I'll just screw up from the bottom into the cabinet instead. As long as the screws and pocket holes stay hidden, no one will ever notice. I'm fresh out of oak at this point, so I'll have to build the drawer box from some old reclaimed pine instead. The first thing is digging out all the old nails and metal embedded in this board with a hammer and a metal detector. Once I was confident I had removed all metal, I could mill this wood through the planer to flatten it out and achieve a consistent thickness. As usual, it turns out I missed a nail and nicked one of my planer blades. Luckily, the damage isn't too bad, and I can finish milling this board. I guess that's the gamble we take reclaiming wood. Cutting this freshly milled old plank into drawer components will be next. I chopped everything to length on the miter saw first, then finished sizing on the table saw to dial in the perfect widths. Lastly, I carve out grooves for the plywood bottom panel to slide into. With all my pine milled to size, this scrap wood is getting a second life as the finishing touch on my nightstand. I decided to construct the drawer using pocket hole screws and glue. This way I can be sure that it will be strong and square. The very first thing is to take out my Craig jig again and drill pocket holes in each mating edge. Drill, glue, clamp, screw, repeat. In no time, I've got a sturdy, square drawer box ready for my nightstand. Could I have done dovetail joinery here? Sure. Well, no. Dovetails are a lesson I have not taken yet. I know some people will give me flack over those visible pocket holes when the drawer is open. But they get the job done and are pretty much guaranteed to be perfect every time. Next up was the drawer face. Luckily, I had the foresight to glue up an extra panel for the drawer front when I made my initial oak cabinet boards. Sizing it down to mount on the pine drawer box was easy, using my miter saw to cut to length and table saw to rip to width. Test fitting showed a near perfect fit. I will attach the drawer front later, but first I need to fit the drawer into the cabinet. Time to get this drawer sliding into its new home smoothly. I measured and attached the cabinet slides first, making sure they were level. Then I mounted the runners to the drawer box. When test fitting, the drawer glided in like butter, but I noticed my drawer face was ever so slightly too thick. So I put it back through the planer a couple of times, removing a tiny amount with each pass until it was perfectly flush. On to precisely mounting this drawer face without any unsightly gaps. A sweet trick I learned on YouTube is temporarily fixing the face using double-sided tape. Genius. I use scrap cardboard as spacers to dial in perfect gaps all the way around. Once aligned, I carefully removed the drawer and added a couple screws from the inside, attaching through the pine into the oak face. Taping the drawer face on for easy fitting and spacing is a game changer because details like a perfectly spaced drawer face really elevate a piece of furniture. I'm thankful to have learned the tape trick from more experienced builders willing to share their knowledge online. Home stretch time. First up, adding protection and sheen across this whole piece with a couple coats of hard wax furniture oil. The oil nicely saturates and seals the wood while allowing the handsome oak grain to still shine through. The wax leaves a slight satin luster. After leaving the finish to fully cure for 24 hours, the last step was the drawer pull installation. Wanting to keep it sleek and minimal, I went with an understated brass handle. I chiseled out a shallow recess on the drawer front, allowing the pull to sit perfectly flush. It's the sophisticated touch my nightstand deserves. I'll be honest, I had my doubts at times if this Frankenstein nightstand would come together at all. I'm flooded with pride in achieving such a polished, intentional-looking finished product given my budget tools and self-taught skills. I can't wait to build more functional projects like this. While I was still admiring the final product, my daughter came along and claimed this nightstand for her own bedroom. It's always an honor when family members fight over your creations. But I suppose that means I'm on the hook to craft another one for myself now.